Welcome along to Science Sketchbook's video on how flowering plants reproduce. So re just means doing something again. If you reuse something, you use it again. And produce is making something. So you make yourself again, reproduce. Very simple word. So now let's chop this beautiful flower in half. Another way of saying that is that we've created a cross section. So now let's label up all the different parts of this flower. So we'll begin with this central part of the flower, and this is the female part. This top part here is called the stigma, and this is the part of the flower that collects the pollen grains. We'll talk more about pollen grains later. This central bit here is called the style, which obviously supports the stigma and also contains this next bit. Down the middle is the pollen tube, which does what it says on the tin, and it's the tube that the pollen goes down. Then this section here at the bottom is called the ovary, and then inside the ovary we have these bits here which are called the ovules. And then this whole structure together is called the carpel. So now we'll move on to the male part of the flower. These top bits here are called the anther, and these produce the pollen grains, which are basically the male sex cells of the flower. The bits that support the anther are called the filament, and both together these are called the stamen. And then we have a couple of other bits which are not part of the reproductive system, which we'll label up now. These are obviously the petals, and these are actually a type of leaf that is called the sepal. And then just a couple of bits up here. These I'm sure you know. This is the leaf and this is the stem. So that's our flower all labelled up. Now, to go through some of the parts and what they do, the petals, we might think, are there to look pretty, and actually they are. They're there to look attractive to insects. And what is the function of this attraction to insects? Well, it is to bring insects in who rub up against the pollen that has been created by the anther and that has been held just on the edge of the flower there. And that pollen is sticky and it sticks to the insects, ones that crawl, ones that fly like bees and even birds. And that will then be moved to another flower of the same species. And then when that insect or bird goes into this second flower, the pollen grains get stuck on the stigma and they travel down into the ovary and they go into the ovule. Now this is the part of the plant that once it becomes fertilized, which is what this process is, this becomes a seed. Ovules are the bits that become seeds, and the ovary wall here is what becomes the fruit. And that is how plants then reproduce. The seed goes into the ground, the seed then germinates, and the process starts again. So one last thing on the green parts that you see here. This sepal is the thing that protects the flower when it's still in bud before it comes out. The leaves are green because they are engaged in a process called photosynthesis, which takes carbon dioxide and water with light energy and creates glucose and oxygen. But you'll have to look at one of my other videos for a better explanation of that. And the stem is obviously the thing that holds the whole structure in position so that the light can get to the leaves and that the insects can get to the flowers. So that's a quick run through of how flowering plants reproduce.